good. All right. Hello, welcome back to Prometheus Podcasts. I'm your host, Landon Wade, here with my co-hosts Colin Burns and Sean Ju.
Hello.
So today's episode, this is episode 11, we're going to talk about beauty, which...
And the Beast.
No female guests today.
Yeah, no female guests, so if we talk about Beauty and the Beast, it's only going to be the Beast, apparently.
Yeah.
But... So we're going to get into that. We have kind of an interesting introduction to that. Before we start, though, we're going to do our segment, A Day in the Life.
Oh, boy.
It's horrible.
Boy. Which is,
It's absolutely horrible.
we're barely conscious. And
I got my first sleep last night.
yeah,
This week.
yeah, Sean's been basically living in studio this week. And only came home last night to sleep.
I was supposed to. I went home right after my class, and that was 4:30.
Yeah.
And I was gonna come back to studio at 9:00. I passed out until 12:00 today. I got my week's worth of sleep right there because I can't sleep anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is the final push for us. This is the last week. We have our final review on Monday. Today's Friday. We have our final review on Monday. So we have, in effect...
Technically, everything's due on Sunday.
Yeah, and technically everything's due Sunday. So that means we have, in effect, 2 days, 48 hours to get all of that work done and turned in. Which always seems impossible at the end.
It always seems impossible, but I've done the extreme where I had to start from the thinking phase to the finishing phase in 48 minutes. It's all possible.
48 hours.
48
I was
hours.
going to say, holy cow.
It felt like 48 minutes.
Dean's Cup to the max. Yeah, so we're going to be perhaps even a little bit scatterbrained this episode, I think, just because we're all kind of trying to keep it together.
Oh, I'm great.
Well, Colin's fine. Colin's fine because he's planning on, he's just doing finishing touches tonight, and then he can just have a good weekend, go fishing or something. That's Colin's MO, though.
I'm doing beginning touches right now.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's because I plan ahead, I always plan to be finished
Well,
early.
and you have the time to start working on stuff early, too, so I'm jealous.
What are you talking about?
Okay.
What, you work what, Monday, Wednesday, Friday?
Yeah.
That's about it? So what are you doing all this other time?
Well, because I have other stuff, too, to do. I've got other classes.
So do I, but I still get my shit done.
Okay. Well, we don't need to argue about this.
No, I want to have this argument.
Don't fucking look at me.
Yeah. No, I'm like looking at Sean for help. Okay, so anyway.
Don't look at me. I can't help you there.
Help me.
So this is a time when pretty much everybody's spending every last second they can in studio trying to get their stuff done. People are working overtime in the shops for us to get, our laser cuts and our 3D prints and our 2D prints,
This is where the lighthouse really becomes a lighthouse.
This is when the lighthouse shines brightest. Yeah. So we're really trying to push forward through this. But we're taking some time to take a break and do this podcast for you. Got to talk about beauty. So was there anything else you guys wanted to add with the day in the life, though?
Nothing.
This is our last weekend of stress as architecture undergrad students.
I have a research paper due on the 15th. So
that's not going to be as stressful as this, I don't think.
Research papers are pretty stressful.
That's true. Yeah, well, and on study abroad, y'all are going to be...
Dude, that's a totally different level of...
There's not going to be a stress because there's going to be a beach like 2 minutes away.
Yeah, we could actually take a trip to the beach when we want to.
All right.
Spanish cigars.
We'll see. Yeah, so Colin and Sean are going to Spain on their study abroad trip.
That's going to be fun.
It'll be pretty cool.
It's costly, but...
Cerveza or
what? Yeah.
Definitely costly.
I'll be sticking around working this summer, but they'll be having an awesome time in Spain doing their study abroad. So
it's okay. I get to come back and work too. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm gonna come back and sleep.
Seriously. All right. Well, we can jump into our topic now. We're gonna start talking about beauty. Beauty is a topic that is very controversial, I think, not just in architecture but in philosophy, because there's a lot that is behind beauty. What is beauty? What does it mean?
Let's talk about our types.
What kind of types are you talking about?
I don't know. type that you're attracted to.
Like talking like women or
Oh, yeah,
cars
we're definitely talking about women.
or
Let's talk about women.
Well, I don't think
let's
you
talk
can-
about
No.
women.
No, I don't want to, because you can't
We're not-
compare what you've defined as beauty in women. Is
Let's
the
start
same as you
objectifying
define
women.
Beauty in a structure.
well, I honestly, here's the thing. We're talking about the
Better be careful. You have a wife.
well, I have a wife. No, this is great.
Oh,
This is the
he's
best part.
thinking. He's got his thinking hat on.
Once you pass a certain point in architecture, and like obviously I'm only speaking from the male point of view, but once I passed this certain point in architecture, it was like, how do I say this without like sounding super weird about it? But it's like you start to see a building like you see women, and it's this super weird thing. And lots of architects
Okay,
do
we're not
make the
gonna talk about
comparison.
women anymore.
All right.
No, I would,
Some of the
I would agree with him on that.
Building
though.
is one, like
Well, because here's the thing.
classical woman, gothic woman.
Well, you don't necessarily
Modern
define them that way, but there's this thing to a building that when it has cladding and covering and things like that, it's like a woman wearing clothes. But when a building starts to expose a little bit of structure,
That's why you like all the exposed ceilings.
yeah, that's really the reason.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is like I am a person who I love seeing structure, and that's in a building. And it gives you this weird kind of hype when you see structure in a building. Well, it gives me this weird kind of hype when I see structure in a building, because it's so cool to see how it actually works.
This is definitely screwing up my argument. Because I was going for like the dominating building type, and then he's comparing
Well,
that
what's
to
the
women.
dominating building type?
Like, churches and cathedrals. That
Yeah.
just makes you feel small. That just makes you feel out of scale.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could say skyscrapers make.
No, but he's comparing that to women. I'm not into that.
Well, no, I'm not saying our architectural opinions have to like line up
No.
with our opinions of women. I'm just saying that was kind of an interesting connection.
More like the
I noticed
interior spaces.
the interior. Oh my gosh.
Oh my god.
No.
No, tell us more about that.
No.
Do it. No, but just put a.
Not like the. I don't. To me, I don't find the exterior the structure, the exterior, like to be what defines beauty in architecture. I believe if a space on the interior is elegant and brings this sense of, I don't want to say a higher. I don't know, higher feeling maybe.
Well, it's a fifth sense kind of thing. We can't really sixth sense, I guess, but there's a quality to space that we sense, but it's not necessarily like hearing or touch.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I care more about the beauty of the space than the cover of the
The
space.
experience.
Yeah. Because whatever covers, like whatever skin or structure you put on it, I don't feel, to me personally, doesn't affect it as much as how you feel within the actual space.
Why are you both looking at me? Aren't you? Are you
Well, we
done?
both kind of talked
Oh.
about like
Oh, I didn't know he was done.
we both kind of talked about like what to us is beautiful in architecture.
Yeah, no, that was like my sixth sense coming in. Colin kind of ended that argument with going up sounds. So I
Yeah,
think it was
question mark.
continue.
Yeah.
But I mean, I like buildings that are arrogant. I like buildings that are buildings just for the sake of being built and not be inhabited. And I can't say not be inhabited, but
But not necessarily be a comfortable
yeah,
place for people.
It's not like
Okay.
a lot of modernist architecture.
Because I was going to say, if it's not inhabited, is it really a building or is it a sculpture?
Argue, yeah, that's a good argument.
But
Could
since
be
you
both.
said uncomfortably
Well, and it could be
inhabited,
both.
then it
There's
makes sense.
what's the building you told me about that Louis Kahn did?
Oh yeah,
that you
the
really like?
Salk Institute.
The Salk Institute by Louis Kahn.
It gets so much hate by researchers
Yeah, like
and
everybody hates it.
students around that has to use that institute to do their scientific research because I think it's a
Biohazard?
no, not biohazard. It's not biomedical. It's like sea life.
Marine biology?
That
Yeah.
research, that kind of research center. That's why it's right next to the
Yeah.
seed.
Yeah.
But nobody likes it because, as a research, it uses way too much glazing, so you get way too much sunlight. So it bothers with the research.
Well,
Sometimes it's dangerous for the research to get too much sunlight.
Well, part of me wonders, was it originally created for that purpose?
Yeah. It is.
Well, then you have to wonder, did he have a reason behind? He had to have had a reason behind
It's the
doing that.
beauty.
Well, when was it designed?
I have no idea.
I think.
I'm not much of a historical freak, so.
Uh-huh.
Well, because I think there's beauty in that too, because it is kind of a brutalist structure, which is why I asked when it was designed. Because if it was during kind of the brutalist period, which is 70s and 80s mostly, right?
Yeah. Biological studies.
Yeah, so it's biological studies.
Well, that
for
includes
those of you
anything
that don't know the Salk Institute by Louis Kahn,
It's beautiful.
it is. I agree. It is a very beautiful building. I think it's beautiful for a different reason than you do.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I don't. I think the reason I like it is because it has a very obvious, transparent personality. It's so clear about what it is, and maybe that's why I like structure.
Structural integrity is honest.
Yeah, because I love honest structure in buildings because they're not messing around with you. You can see exactly what it is, and it's not trying to hide anything.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason I think I really like the Salk Institutes, because it's just this very heavy. It's basically all concrete,
Well,
right?
yeah, mostly concrete.
Yeah,
A lot
it's
of glass.
a very
Little wood.
beautiful building.
It's also
Louis Kahn has always been very good at
I
that.
guess I would also make it very simplistic too.
Yeah. Well, it's
Part
also
of what makes it brutal is it's really just two key.
Yeah.
I literally just went brain dead. Two key materials.
okay. What?
Pause it.
Well, I just cut it out.
Alright, we're good.
Dude, that sounded like that sounded difficult.
It was difficult.
What was I gonna say? Well, so like relating back to a thought I just had is relating back to we were relating like women to architecture, which is ironic that we're saying all this like right after we
So
have
you're
our
like woman.
No,
it's
So
an-
your presence of arms and legs and torso.
No, someone that's
someone that's straighthtaught. Because
just naturally raw.
No, I was thinking about it physically. I'm just like, so you're like a woman with clear arms
yeah,
and legs and a torso and a neck and a head.
yeah. No,
Or has a strong presence.
well, yeah. One, somebody who enters the room, you can feel it. Just like when you get close to that building, just like when you get close to the Salk Institute or a building that has a personality like it, you can feel it. And someone who is also transparent and straightforward. A lot of people play games. They love to be indirect about things and manipulative. There's those.
Yeah.
We can all name a million of those game Collins.
Sean,
But when they're straightforward and transparent, it's just a lot. It's a lot easier. I think that's part of what makes it so powerful, because there's no shame.
Putting my name in this thing.
Why? What?
But I think I can relate to that. Like whatever you're really kind of relating it back to woman.
Yeah.
If you are, the Salk Institute is kind of arrogant. It's. I feel like.
Well, when you say arrogant, what do you mean?
See, this is weird because when I see buildings,
Yeah.
it's just like I can feel their character.
Yeah.
Like the personification of the building is what really interests me.
Yeah.
And for some reason, Salk Institute just kind of talks to me. It's like it's on a higher level than just being a structure, than just being something that can be inhabited by people. It's the experience. Because Salk Institute has the very distinct sort of plaza-ish space.
Yeah.
Where it lines up exactly with the spring and fall equinox.
Yeah.
And it just, that really shows you how much it really stands out for itself.
Yeah.
Rather than by the people that are inhabiting it.
Yeah.
It's not the building that people have to take care of.
So you're saying the building supports the building, not the people support the building.
Yeah. And it's so, like talking about it like this, it's so arrogant and really kind of derogatory.
Well, then you could almost, if the building supports the building, then you could almost say the building is a sculpture. If it doesn't need people to support it, then it could be a sculpture.
And is that what's beautiful about it?
Yeah.
Is that it's independent?
Yeah.
I would think so, because there's not really a lot of buildings I feel today that actually do that or can do that and still be around.
No.
Well, I think it's interesting because going off, I guess, both of your points is that right off the bat, we started talking about beauty, and right off the bat, we're not talking about things that are at face value. We're not talking about...
Oh, we could talk millions of buildings with face value.
Well, but like
That's
right off the bat,
yeah.
the three of us, we're talking about character, and we're talking about all these
The deeper lying out.
kind of the
Listen.
deeper lying things, which is interesting.
Yeah, because I think everybody's gonna have a similar three-dimensional experience with any building. Like, you see what's that building? The CCTV headquarters
Yeah,
in Beijing. The first thing you think of is like, wow, this is dynamic.
yeah,
And that's just on the exterior. And the interior, it's very effectively used.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's gonna have that same notion, but what really makes it different is like what you and Colin said. It's the sixth sense. It's the emotion and the experience that it brings to you that makes a building unique.
Also, to speak on this sort of sixth sense is actually kind of the idea or the path I've taken in the conclusion to my thesis paper for contemporary issues.
I knew you were gonna bring that up. Yeah,
Yeah, because this is like, I think everything relies back to the topic that I'm writing about,
yeah,
but a sense of describing architecture as the sixth sense. It's not these base raw emotions, it's this feeling that you can't explain, but drives off of your baser instincts and emotions as a person.
yeah,
Which is what I feel like architects strive to do, is to pull at people's feelings, but not their basic emotions.
Yeah.
Because feelings are on a much deeper level with, they tie experiences, your connection to other things that they remind you of. So I feel like that's something that architects really
Yeah.
strive for.
And
is
this doesn't even have
success.
to be about architecture. This can be about anything. Like, this can even be related to movies. I talked to Colin a couple of days ago.
That's all we talk about is movies, I feel.
What was that? What was that thing? What was
Well, I
that movie? Marley and Me? Have you ever
Yeah,
seen
we were talking
I
about
haven't
Marley.
seen it.
Yeah, we were talking about Marley and Me.
And Marley and Me, it's about the life-changing experience, that life-changing relationship that this man has with his dog.
yeah,
That he found. He just found this puppy, and it's ended up raising it until its death, and how it changes him as
Yeah.
a person. But I first watched it when it came out, and I was a freshman in high school, I think, and I did not shed a tear. I was watching
You
it.
probably had a base emotion like, oh, this is sad.
Well, yeah,
Like, it's a sad movie, but I'm not really
but-
I don't
but
feel that.
but I was with my date when I was watching the movie, and she bawled her eyes out, and we're observing the same movie.
yeah,
None of the scenes are going to be different for any of us that are watching the movie, but it's the emotion that you feel. It's the provocation
well, it
that
becomes
the movie has upon you as an individual that makes the movie different for how I felt it versus how she felt it.
yeah,
4 years later, when my dog died, I watched the movie again, and I bawled my eyes out.
yeah.
It was bad.
Well, it really becomes, so what we're saying both with the movie and architecture is that even though it is the same,
Yeah.
even though that is the same, each person has a different relationship
Oh yeah.
with.
Yeah, we talked about Inglourious Bastards. That first scene, it
Exactly.
made you super uncomfortable.
Well, no, and that's what's beautiful about it
And
is that it's
I-
effective. It's
Absolutely love that scene. I could sleep watching that scene.
right.
Yeah.
Well, so I think it's interesting because we're talking about relationships and, I guess for lack of a better term, impressions that come from the 5 traditional senses. And beauty as the world sees it or as it's portrayed, there's so much focus on on the physical, or not physical rather, but just on the visual appearance of things. You look at, and social media is a huge piece of evidence towards that. You look at Facebook or Snapchat or Tinder is probably like the best example, because people are just looking for the look of something, which is interesting because that contrasts a lot to the conversation we're having, which is still about beauty, still about what is appealing to us, but
I mean, what can I say? A hot girl's always going to be hot.
well, it's still about that stuff, but right now it's just all about, it has more to do with, in this conversation, it has more to do with an experience and a relationship than it does like a visual appearance for something. So I find that really interesting that it's just so different, because maybe it's because of our training as architects, or if it's just that we have spent enough time together and had deep enough conversations that we're okay opening up about that. Because it's not that other people don't think about, well, maybe they don't think about it, but everybody gets those kind of base feelings Colin was referring to. Everybody has the 5 senses. Well, not everybody, but most people have the 5 senses. There's always input, but we're talking about those impressions that people get from the relationships.
I mean, yeah, Colin, how do you feel about it? Like, as the only Tinder user out of all 3 of us.
Okay. Let's get it.
Have you had any successes?
I mean, yes, but not in the way I feel like in this point in my life, like we strive for, in terms of beauty, we are looking for different things.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for beauty in character and
Yeah.
all these different fields, to where I feel Tinder, it's easy to find success in the aesthetic appeal of the way modern society has played it, which I've had much success in the aesthetic appeal that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to actually talking to them, I feel they hit a lot of these, they don't hit any of these classifications of beauty that I would look for and on a deeper level, which is where I feel like most people today aren't willing to look past these aesthetic appeals to get to the deeper stuff, which I feel, and Landon was touching on earlier, whereas architects, we've kind of been trained and molded to look past the first appeal of physicality and get towards the deeper meaning of things.
I don't know, Landon. Have you used Tinder before?
No. Dude, I think when Tinder came out,
Christian Mingle?
I'm
pretty sure you were
No, bro.
He was in Brazil when Tinder came out.
Yeah, I think I was in Brazil when Tinder
Have you had
came
any
out.
looks with the Brazilian girls?
No, I was.
You
That
just
was a different.
$5 bill, dude. You're good.
Oh my
Wow, that's
gosh.
really derogatory.
Derogatory, but true.
Yeah, I was in Brazil at a different. That was a season of my life that was definitely not the focus. There was a very heavy religious focus at that point.
I've used Tinder for a day, for 4 hours, and
That's all it is. That's all it's for, is to look at aesthetic appeal. That's all it was made for.
It really is.
Well, and like that's not to say that it can't lead to other things. Like there's still some value in it, but there's nothing
that's the bio.
right. That's why they have a bio. 21 years old. Yeah.
No, more like, I'm here to steal your dog. Like, oh wow, thanks.
Some of the I think it's kind of funny that there's a lot of biblical quotes.
Oh yeah, because like people put a scripture or something,
Yeah,
like
people put, like,
Psalms, like it's always freaking
Like the
Psalms.
Psalms 13.
And then one of the pictures is them like slobber face to the bar in the front. It's like, no.
It's like Psalms talking about like a virtuous woman is the price of rubies, and this girl in her picture is like totally,
Like the revelation, like I saw somebody this girl put I don't know if it was a prank or not, but this girl had the scripture of the Revelation.
Yeah.
And it was a part when, was it the second or third trumpet?
And the trump shall sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this girl was she had a picture of her at a bar with beer bottles and her friends flashing next to her.
Oh my.
I'm just like, well, I mean, at least you know.
You know, whatever gets you swiped right or whatever it is. Like the guy's like.
I guess I need to swipe left. You know, I don't want to get mauled by the beast of hell.
Yeah. Geez. Well, so it's just interesting that everyone has these senses, and everyone has this extra input due to the 5 senses. So a lot of people argue, especially one of the reasons that beauty is so controversial amongst philosophers and architects, is that it is an argument of like, well, is beauty just visual? What is, like, how do we perceive beauty? It's just beauty is such a I don't want to use the word vague because it's not vague, but it's just so widely. Yeah, the way I see beauty is that it's controversial because it's very widely defined. Anyone can say that's beautiful, but they can say it's beautiful because it sounds good, because it looks good, because it tastes good, because the experience was good, because there's all sorts of things like that they could say. So if it's if they're at a restaurant and they say that the food is beautiful, how many senses are you appealing to? Because there's texture, there's smell,
Oh yeah.
there's sight.
You
Because
eat your food 3 times, with your eyes, with your nose, and with your mouth. That's how you eat food.
well, but there's 2 senses in your mouth, so arguably could be 4. And you hear the sizzle. 5.
Like if you have fajitas, the green eyes like.
Yeah. Well, no, you hear the sizzling before they even get to your table, right?
I was going for a lot higher, like. I was
Or
going
when
for
you
some
eat
kind of
chips and salsa, and you're just like.
I was going for like a course meal kind of stuff, not like fajitas and chilies.
Or like when Sean.
That's my bad.
Well, no,
or
here,
like when Sean eats ramen noodles.
let's run through the experience of getting fajitas at a restaurant, right?
God.
So you order fajitas.
No, you first go in and take a.
The anticipation.
You go to Chili's.
Look, you really want to talk about it. First, you have to wake up in the morning.
First, you have to be born. So you order your fajitas, right? There's the anticipation.
And then they bring out the Coke.
And then you hear
then
like,
there's a disappointment. They bring the Coke out.
well, whatever. Yeah, you get your soft drink. You get your fajitas, but you hear the meat sizzling when they come out of the
You
thing.
hear the meat sizzling.
Right. At least when you get the good old Tex-Mex stuff, they come out. Okay, you guys. So they bust out through the door. The meat's sizzling, so you're hearing it. They set it down in front of you so you can see it. You can see the tender meat and all that kind of stuff.
And you smell it.
Then you can definitely smell it
that
with all like the onions and stuff like that were sizzling with it.
And then you touch the tortilla.
Right? You can feel the warm, soft tortilla.
If it's served right.
If like this is a legit restaurant.
I hate cold tortillas. It should be a sin.
Well, if it's cold, just set it on top of the fajitas and it'll get warm real quick.
Yeah, well, and then finally you load up your fajita, smelling it the whole time. You finally taste it, and you can feel the texture of the meat as you're chewing, and you can actually taste the food. Mm-hmm. So that's like every one of your senses was engaged in that experience. Why was it beautiful? And that goes back to what you were saying about architecture and filmmaking. It's like everybody's getting the same 5. Everybody has the same 5 senses throughout that experience, but everybody's impression is different.
All right, so I'm getting 2 things out of what Landon just said.
Yeah.
And everybody's experience and beauties are.
I need to pay more attention when I eat food.
And we're gonna go grab fajitas for dinner.
Yeah. Well, so the
Come on,
beauty
mouth
becomes
water.
controversial because it's like, where the heck is all that? And we're tying together.
Yeah.
What we're saying is that we're tying together those 5 senses because those 5 senses together create an impression and a relationship between you and the building or the food or the film, whatever it is that we're talking
There's a
about.
professor that I really, really appreciate, and he did a project once. He set up a project once for the students to design a building for the handicapped where they can't see and hear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Am I?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember the details of that project.
See and hear, and then some of the projects that came out, it had to solely rely on, only some of your instincts.
And I think that's kind of interesting.
It's
making you create a project for people that don't have one of the biggest senses, or
two of the biggest
senses that we use and take for granted every day.
Yeah.
Well, and part of what they did before they designed in that project is they went out and did research. And so they would go places blindfolded, for example. They would go to the mall I think they even had some of their friends, the students would have some of their friends just drop them off somewhere. And they had to figure out where they were without being able to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
I would never, ever do that project with 2 of you.
Yeah, we drop you off in the middle of a road somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, no, that's the thing. It's
Taking down the farm road outside the loop.
Yeah,
or
right.
outside the slate.
This is how I end up getting shot because I'm standing in somebody's farm.
Yeah.
Taking out to Slayton.
So, yeah, and so these are just a few of the many, many, many ways you can approach the idea of beauty, because it is based on the senses, but even on a deeper level, it's based on impressions.
It's always recommended that you eat your food
well, this has nothing to do with it, but like the first bite of your food, you should enjoy it with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
It's like it really heightens the experience.
Well, see, and that's wise because in a way you're changing the experience because
Yeah.
you're changing the way you're inputting those senses.
Well, because then you can't. Well, if you didn't, you can't see what you're putting in your mouth. Because when you see a certain food, you already have this sort of preconceived idea of what it tastes like.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it does change it. When you see a fajita rolling up, you're expecting X, Y, and Z, right? You're expecting
Yeah.
probably salty. You're expecting
Charred.
possibly charred meat,
A little spice.
maybe a little spice. Like everybody has kind
Hopefully
of.
little spice.
Well, and there are a lot of
Unless you're
preconceived
He
notions.
doesn't like spicy food.
No, like I'm talking about like spices and like other spices, not just
Right,
spices.
flavor. Yeah. Well, so beauty is this experience and how it affects you, but
Beauty is food.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
I would have to agree with that right now, but
Beauty is. Never mind.
I think this
What
is
you gonna say about it?
this is what we can do right here in this moment. We can invite you, the listeners, to comment and talk about what you find beautiful.
Yeah. It could be anything. We talk about everything.
Yeah, like
We talk about
run me through a
Yeah, it
narrative.
could be woman. Anne Hathaway. She's the most beautiful woman in the world.
How about we limit this? Don't talk about your mom.
Yeah. Well,
No moms. Anything but moms.
I think my mom is beautiful. She's so kind.
She gave birth to me.
Yeah. Well,
So she's not that kind.
let's talk about something. Let's talk about something unconventional, something that people usually don't talk about as
Beautiful.
as beautiful.
Yeah.
Because obviously, women
Engines.
think men are beautiful in a way. Men think women are beautiful in a way.
Engines.
And an engine is something you don't
Sound of a
necessarily
wave.
always think is beautiful. The sound of a wave, something you don't always think is beautiful.
I would say that kind of falls into that category of nature,
Yeah.
and a lot of people find
Well,
nature beautiful.
Well, lately it's been.
But those things are
it's been
impressions.
Thing.
Yeah.
Nature.
I think the quiet is beautiful.
I think
Just quiet.
Have you ever been in a soundproof room before?
Yeah. No,
That's
it's
not
great.
beautiful. That is like borderline. Makes me want to go
Well, I
crazy.
think it's
like,
beautiful.
We're talking about
It's just-
extremes here. Like that's like telling somebody that I think this smell is beautiful. It's like, have you been to a gas chamber?
Well, anyway, so because there's a lot of directions we could take this. If we could talk about beauty all day, just because of we can talk about beauty on any level, whether it's the senses or the impressions that the senses give us, or how those impressions relate to expectations or past experiences. What?
That's how it's beautiful. My grandparents they used to have a painting in their living room. I can't remember if it sat behind the TV. It was a little off the side of the TV, and I used to look at it all the time. I could look at it for hours, and it is a landscape painting of the area where my whole entire family's from, and it is literally just a nature scene of the woods, and there is a lone white-tailed deer in the middle distance of the background. It's not like in the foreground or the complete background, but it's in the middle distance.
That's about to get shot.
No, it's just it's literally just a oil painting of the woods, and then this lone majestic deer, not too far forward, but not too far back. And now I used to just think that was the most beautiful painting. I still find it in high regard to what stuff I've seen today.
I mean, some of the things, like beauty doesn't have to be from far away. You don't have to go far to find beauty. You can find beauty in your own life, in your own childhood.
Like sunsets.
Yeah.
I definitely West Texas sunsets beat all the sunsets I've seen so far.
Yeah. It's like when I used to live in Korea as a kid, I used to go out every night, and we lived so close together. We lived in an apartment, high apartment buildings. So the parents would know where we are, and all the parents would kind of yell out their kid's name out the window. Say, hey, whatever, come back and eat, grab something to eat, have dinner. And we'd all kind of get that calling and go back upstairs and eat and say goodbye. And I think that memory of mine is beautiful. Is because you don't really find that nowadays.
No, it's true.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's like a sense of like you're not like blood related, but you're a family.
Yeah.
It's almost like being a really big family.
Well, it's because you share a common core memory experience, you know. So I guess I'm just now it's hitting me that this whole time we've gotten so carried away with talking about beauty and the senses and how it relates to that we've kind of forgotten a little bit about the architecture side of things.
Yeah. We did.
I mean, so obviously there's an architect that is my father and I really like. His name is Ioannis Palasma, and he wrote a book that's called The Eyes of the Skin. And it relates to the senses, and he speaks a little bit about beauty and things like that too. And one of the things that I find beautiful in architecture is when there are textures that it kind of works both ways. There are textures you can see from far away, and you almost don't even need to physically feel them to be able to understand. You can feel it. And I think that type of texture in architecture is much more powerful than people think it is. And I'll use an example I've used before, I think, in one of our earlier episodes, was the Kimball Museum in Fort Worth that Louis Kahn designed. There are these these beautiful vaulted ceilings, these barrel vaults that are extremely smooth concrete, and it's beautifully done. It's the craftsmanship on it was amazing. First of all, super smooth concrete, and then right under that and right up next to it, he's put this limestone that's really porous, still smooth, but it has a lot of holes. So it's this kind of balance between smooth, rough. You put those two together, and it creates this super interesting change. And when we first walked in, I couldn't help. I ran to a wall as fast as I could, and I was touching everything. And my wife, who was my fiance at the time, was like she was a little bit weird because
because she knows how you relate building to woman. And touch everything.
Right. Yes, she's a little bit offended, but she was just laughing because I looked like a weirdo. We walk into an art museum.
Architects are always like a
well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing is we walked into an art museum, and instead of going to look at the art, I rushed to a wall to start touching it. But it's because of the beauty that there was in the texture. I had to feel it. I just couldn't stay away because that sense. The eyes, because of the appeal to the eyes, it brought me in because I had to have that tactile sense of it.
Like, I've never been to the Pompidou Center. It's one of my favorite buildings. Mm-hmm. But through the pictures, I can kind of see as in like the texture and everything.
Yeah.
From my past experiences of dealing with the pipings, the steel beams, the channels, and everything that's going on the outside, I can kind of just imagine what it would feel like. And hopefully it'll be different when I go and visit it, because that would totally be a surprise for me. But I mean, it's just one of those things that that's the beauty. That's bringing in the memories of the people that are experiencing it, and that's a beautiful thing.
Well, and it's interesting when an architect can do that. When you can tap into something that's such a core memory that people have.
Provoking the emotion.
Yeah, you're provoking an experience based off of one visual impression. Yeah. You know, like Renzo has done with the Pompidou Center. Yeah, I had to look it up because I was like one of those that I recognize, but and it's my boy Renzo. I love Renzo.
Oh yeah, Renzo. We worked at a Renzo Piano's art gallery.
Yeah, his in Houston.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Renzo Piano is an amazing art. He's one of my most favorites.
He's so he's so delightfully perfect.
He's very deliberate and controlled, but it's kind of carefree too.
It's nothing like some of the architects that I can't name, but some of the architecture that I see that are really perfect and down to zero kind of architecture. You see it and you kind of feel far away from it because it's so perfect. But Renzo Piano, he does everything in a perfect way, but it's so delightful and deliberate. It doesn't feel far away from you.
Well, it's relatable because he does stuff like what you were talking about.
And that's what I think makes his architecture
I can say, more beautiful than the ones that I've seen.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point, and we're coming up on like 40 minutes right now, so I think this is a good break in the conversation. We've
Next week we're going to talk about Fermitas.
well, yeah. Well, and I guess we've considered doing a 3-part series talking about Vitruvius and his 3 principles of architecture, which is Firmitas, Venustas, it's Venustitas, which is beauty, which is kind of what we're talking about, and then Utilitas. So Firmitas being firmness, more directly translated, or it has to do with structural and the firmness of something, how long it lasts, and then Utilitas being utility, or the use of something, how something's used. We've considered doing a 3-part podcast considering those things. This could count kind of as our part 1. Honestly, I'm just going to title this Beauty Part 1 because we know there's a lot more discussion that can come out of this because we've barely scratched the surface. If you look up stuff that philosophers have said about beauty, philosophers and tons of architects have written about this, historical architects and modern. But it's such a deep subject because it's so.
I can't remember the name, but somebody said the beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I see, therefore I am. There's all sorts of.
Therefore I am.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I think therefore I am.
I think there was also a like
Corbusier. Well, it's like those kind of famous.
I think therefore I am.
Get carried
they
away.
get mixed up, but.
But I think therefore I am was said by Descartes.
Descartes. There we go. I'll have to check on that. Maybe I'm just making things up.
Don't make things up.
Yeah, it was like Corbusier said it. Duh, bro. If I like anything slightly maybe not credible that I say, it's like, bro, but like Corbusier said it, so it's cool.
Blame everything on Corbusier.
But anyway, I think we're wrapping up our episode. Colin, is there anything you want to add real quick before it?
Any quotes you want to make up?
Colin's been taken aback by the beauty of this conversation.
Yeah.
He just needs to sit back and absorb right now.
Yeah, or we can. Yeah, let's go grab fajitas. Let's wrap this up.
Right. All right. Well, we thank y'all for listening. We hope it's a good podcast for you. Comment, post, donate.
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 Definitely donate.
Anyway, we don't even have a page for donations or anything. Whatever.
Let's create a Venmo.
No,
Yeah, we
just
create a
tell
Venmo.
them our addresses so they can send a checkbook.
Anyway.
Yeah, because we won't have people show up at our house if we do that. Right?
The money, what we want more than donations is just your participation.
Yeah,
so we really agree. Participate, share,
Participate
comment,
by sending us money.
send us topics if you want to contribute to the conversation. If you want to be a part of our podcast, feel free to comment. We can make arrangements, and we can talk about what you want to talk about, tie that into architecture.
Oh yeah, we can. Give us a topic. We'll talk about it. We'll gladly talk about it.
We'll do it.
We
We'll
can
do
talk
it.
about anything.
We can tie it to architecture.
Okay, we can talk about a lot of things.
That's part of what we can talk about a lot of things, but we can tie pretty much anything to architecture.
Yeah. Challenge us.
Yeah, challenge us. We'll tie it to architecture. But all right, so that from us here at Prometheus Studios. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye.